Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
It is Monday, July 8th, 2024, and I'm Candace Kelly, sitting in for Roland, who's taking a day to recuperate after his trip to Ethiopia. Here's what's coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. President Joe Biden is making it known that he will not step aside and will continue his quest to remain at the White House. Tonight, we'll break down the cause of the Biden election anxiety. Congresswoman Maxine Waters has some stern words for those who say Biden is too old for a second term. As President Kamala Harris describes to folks attending the 30th Essence Festival of Culture the dangers of a Trump second term. The Black Pennsylvania radio host who said the White House sent her questions to ask President Biden before the interview is fired. June's Black unemployment rate is on the rise, and we're going to talk to our resident economist, Morgan Harper, all about that uptick. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time, and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
We're not going anywhere. I am not going anywhere. I wouldn't be running if I didn't absolutely believe that I am the best candidate to beat Donald Trump in 2024. We had a Democratic nominating process where the voters spoke clearly. I won 14 million of those votes.
All right, so there you have it, folks. President Biden is making it clear that he will remain in the presidential race despite concerns from Democrats. Now, Biden called into MSNBC's morning show after he sent a letter to Democrats on Capitol Hill that he would not drop out of the race.
I haven't lost. I beat him last time. I'll beat him this time. And this is a guy who, look, we talk about debates. Look at his performance at debates. He lied over, Trump has 50 lies. Look, this is a guy who says 10% of the universe. I want to get into it. He's just a liar. And he hasn't done a damn thing since the debate. He's been riding around in a golf cart for 10 days, was down in Mar-a-Lago talking with his wealthy friends. I'm not running because of these guys, Joe. I'm running because, and you know me well enough to know this from the very beginning, I ran because I never bought on to the trickle-down economic theory. I never bought into the notion that we have to walk away from the rest of the world and cave to Putin or anybody else. I've never believed any of that, and I'm confident that's where the American people are. So what I did was I went out and I wanted to make sure that there wasn't any slippage at all. And with the average voter, I don't care what the millionaires think. And by the way, 97% of all the people who contribute to us are people making under 200, contributing under $200. I think we have the largest contingent ever in history. I'm not positive of that, but I think that's true. And so I want their support, but that's not the reason I'm running. I'm not running about what they think and what they care about. And by the way, you don't see a whole hell of a lot of them flocking to Trump. You don't see a whole lot of CEOs flocking to Trump. You don't see any. You see the major economists out there talking about what I have been able to do. I don't hear anybody talking about his economic plan likely to bring America around and keep America first. And by the way, here's Trump talking about all that he's done and Trump and his debate night. He's a pathological liar. He lied about Roe. He refused to accept the outcome of the election. He refused to condemn January 6th. And he says, they claim, he spoke with Putin before he invaded. What the hell are we doing, Joe?
All right. So Tamia D. Booker, founder and managing director of T. Booker Strategies, joins me now to dissect all of this. Tamia, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. My first question to you is this. What do you think about the call to Morning Joe? Do you think that it made a little bit worse in that, listen, we couldn't see him, so we didn't know whether he was reading notes or not. It sounded like he was. There was one time where I caught him making reference to a list that he had. What do you think about his performance and what it did for his chances?
I think that the president, we witnessed amount of frustration in his voice and with this whole issue since the debate. Yes, he had a debate that was not that great. However, he is right. The level of accountability that Trump has had to keep since the debate is not there. He stood there and he told blatant lies. And we have a president who we knew his age when we elected him back in 2020 and knew there would be a chance that he would run again in 2024. And he's someone that has stood with the Black community. He has really helped us. He's been fighting for student loan repayment and forgiveness. And for whatever reason right now, the media is really focused in on a bad debate and less about what is really at stake. Our reproductive rights are at stake. Our health and well-being is at stake. Our safety as Black people in this country are at stake. And so you can't blame him for being frustrated, given that this has been the conversation for the last almost 2 weeks versus a candidate who is a felon and also stood there and told numerous lies throughout the debate.
So to me, I think one of the questions becomes for many, this isn't something that's new for the president. This is something that we've been seeing progressively, whatever you might think it is, in terms of the loss of words, in terms of the blurred speech, in terms of him just not remembering and getting facts wrong. So is there a little bit of concern for some, Biden reelection anxiety?
Yes. And, we saw today, especially during the White House press briefing, they asked the press secretary about his health. And I think we have to lean on really the assessment of the doctors. If the doctors are clearing him and saying that he is good to run the country, then we need to trust in that. It is hard to see when you're seeing someone who also might be just aging. And the country has really expressed concern about this. But I think if he has physicians that have cleared him, then we should continue to trust that he is doing just fine. He's been campaigning since, nonstop, traveling all over the U.S., campaigning in battleground states, making his case. And he made a strong case this morning. And I think we have to just lean into the fact that he's made his case, and that's where we are. He's not getting out of the race, and we need to rally behind him.
What about leaning into this whole idea that in order to really kind of solidify or not solidify this, and this is why it's such a between rock and a hard place, do you make sure that you push Kamala out there, the Vice President Kamala Harris out there, or are you holding back on that? Because either way could hurt you. What are your thoughts on that in terms of strategy?
The vice presidential pick is always picked to help lift the ticket, right, and to bring momentum. And she did that in 2020. And so why wouldn't she do that again in 2024? She is someone that can really speak, especially with reproductive rights and abortion on the top of a lot of voters' minds, and something that's really at stake that Trump said that he would nationalize an abortion ban. It makes sense to have a woman stand here and campaign on behalf of that. She has been doing that throughout the presidency, her vice presidency. She's been speaking to what the administration needs to do and will continue to do so. So I don't see anything different because the presidential debate this year was actually earlier, and usually the presidential debates are later in September, right after the conventions, and they springboard the general election cycle. So this time the general election cycle just started earlier, so her being out there on the trail is just really in concordance with the schedule that they put together, having the debate start in June.
Yeah, and it has started earlier, and now we see the repercussions of it. But I'm wondering, you're on Joe Biden's team. What are your next steps in terms of what do we need to do in order to win this race? And actually, on the other side of it, what do we make sure we don't do, because that would make us lose the race?
Yes, and I will say that I'm a strategist and I work with the Democratic Committee. I'm not an exact member of the staff, so I want to make that clear distinction before I say this. I just meant as a scenario. Like, say you are on his team. Oh, I see.
What do you tell him?
Oh, yes. If you're on the team right now, it's really the time to rally the people and really make the strong case that you should vote for him, right? We went through reasons why we should not take the risk of sitting at home and letting Donald Trump win this election, because we've got to protect ourselves and save ourselves. Unfortunately, and fortunately, it is on us. And so if I were on the campaign right now, the strategy would really be around reaching voters, talking to voters in every way possible, doing what they're doing, which is having him out campaigning across the country, and then making sure that there is a field program to talk to voters about why this is important. Yes, these are people that maybe you don't feel you can relate to all the time. But the presidency is more than just one person. It is an administration of thousands of federal workers who are working to help you. And so that is the part that people need to realize and continue to do. And to remember, we still have to vote. Our ancestors fought so hard for this right, and we can't sit back, especially not right now.
All right, Tamia, we're going to take a break, so stay with us. We're going to get to our panel and a few more questions for you after the break. Stay with us. You are watching Roland Martin on the Roland Martin Network. Stay with us.
Coming soon to the Black Star Network.
I still have my NFL contract in my house. I have it in a case. It's 4 of them, for my 4-year contract. I got a $600,000 signing bonus. My base salary for that first year was $150,000. Matter of fact, $150,000. $150,000. That's what I made. $150,000. Now think about it. My signing bonus was a forgivable loan, supposedly. When I got traded to the Colts, they made me pay back my signing bonus to them. I had to give them their $600,000 back. Wow. Yeah, I was so pissed. Because, I try to be a man of my word. I'm like, you, I'll give you your money back. Even though I know I earned that money, I gave them their money back. I gave them their $600,000 back. But yet, I was this malcontent. I was a bad guy. I'm about the money. It wasn't about the money. It was about doing right. Because I looked at, because you look at contract. Look at John Elway. John Elway was making $1 million, $800,000. I was making $150,000. I was doing everything. And I'm like, but yet I was, I got so many letters, so I just play for free and all that kind of stuff. You don't forget that kind of stuff. Right. That stuff is hurtful.
This is Essence Atkins.
What's the love king of R&B, Raheem Devon?
It's me, Sherry Shepherd, and you know what you watch.
You're watching Roland Martin, Unfiltered.
All right, we are talking about Biden's reelection anxiety. Join me now to talk about this. For the panel is Dr. Omakongo Dibinga, Senior Professional Lecturer at the School of International Service at American University out of Washington, D.C. Dr. Julianne Malveaux, she's an economist and an author also out of Washington, D.C. And Gavin Reynolds, he is a contributor to The Root and former speechwriter to Vice President Kamala Harris. He joins us from New Haven, Connecticut. Thank you all for being with us this evening. I want to first start with you, Dr. Malveaux. A question for our guest, Tamia.
Tamia, President Biden missed an opportunity, I think, by not attending the Poor People's March and Rally on June 29th, a couple days after his debacle. I won't call it a debate. And I wrote a piece today that actually said he needs to get out more, not just out. Calling 20 members of Congress is not it. He needs to go to these, it's summertime. People are out and about. This is a time, I was so happy to see Kamala at Essence. I think she was extraordinarily effective there. But there are all kinds of gatherings and sororities and fraternities meet in the summer, the NAACP, the Urban League. I think that he should be out and about. And I think that makes a case that the Congress says he hasn't made. What do you think about really programming him to be out more?
I can't agree with you more than what you just said. I started my work doing that type of outreach, making sure candidates went to our big events. And that's what he does need to do. The campaign, as I was saying earlier, really needs to make sure they're reaching voters. And the folks at the conferences that you mentioned, especially the NAACP, the Urban League, these are the people that do the work. And so he needs to make his case over and over again with organizations in addition to his campaign events. So I think that's the other thing that's important. So I can't agree with you. I can't agree with you any more than what you said, because I think it's just so important with all constituency groups to make sure that the president is speaking to people at these conferences and has the opportunity to really speak to what his administration has done and what they will continue to do.
Gavin, question for Tamia.
Tamia, thank you. I think a lot of us recognize that this election is going to come down to Black voters in key cities, in key states, whether it's Atlanta, Georgia, my hometown, Detroit, Michigan, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Oh, nice. So I think obviously, the president and his administration have delivered an incredible record for the Black community, whether it's creating jobs or lowering the cost of healthcare. But obviously, we've seen that those accomplishments haven't necessarily completely translated into sentiments felt by ordinary folks on the ground. What do you think Black voters, let's say Black men, because I think Black women are solidly, have been so reliable for the Democratic Party coming out and voting in elections. What do you think Black men in these cities, in these states, need to hear from the president to activate them? Not to necessarily not vote for Donald Trump, but to get off the couch and cast a ballot for him, for Joe Biden in November.
Yes, that's a great question. And thank you for shouting out my home city of Philadelphia, which is a very large city and a very large battleground state. And I will say just from that perspective, too, it's really we've seen with Black men in particular, the issues with the economy is really hitting home. And he really needs to talk about how he makes the economy stable, how housing can be more affordable, how our groceries can be more affordable once again, because I think that is one thing I've seen in just my campaign work this past year. That's at the top of voters' minds. And for Black men in particular, as they're leading their families, as they're trying to establish themselves, it's very important that he speaks to our men about those particular issues. And I know that he went to Morehouse, but we also need to go to other HBCUs. And over the summer, we need to go to non-HBCUs. And I'm an HBCU graduate, but I think it's important that we're reaching us everywhere. And then also, again, like Dr. Malveaux suggested, is going to these conferences where people are already gathering, meet the people where they are. So if our men are doing events or barbecues or what have you, he should stop through those. And he does have Black men at the leadership helm on his team. And I think that we'll see more of that focus over the summertime.
Thanks, Tamia.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Dibinga, a question for Tamia.
Yes, Tamia, I want to ask you a question about the media. People talk so much about how in 2016. You know, the media gave like Donald Trump like over $1 billion and basically like free advertisement, the way they kept promoting him. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on what seems to me to be a double standard where, you know, Trump has been incoherent throughout the election process, looking at the rallies, so on and so forth. And so not even talking about the whole thing about wanting to be a dictator and all of that. I'm just talking about like the optics and why you think, or do you think the media has been fair as it relates to how it treats Biden's actions versus how they treat Trump's actions?
That's a great question. I just had this conversation earlier today. You know, in 2016, President Obama was furious at how much airtime they gave Trump. And we're seeing it in a different way right now. I, at one point, just wanted to stop looking at my phone because I looked at one article about the debate, and then my phone was flooded with every single thing that was bad about Biden or the administration or the campaign staff. And it does feel like it's a little bit of a coordinated effort here because it's summertime, it's slower, we can pile on. And we have to remember that a lot of these media companies are Republican run. So there's some advantages that they get when there's a Republican president, no matter who he is. And so we also have to be careful about the news that we're taking into and formulating our own opinions. And that's why I love coming on here and talking with you all the time and talking with Black folks who really are speaking to our issues, because sometimes it really is about the clickbait. We've looked at some of these articles where the headline has nothing to do with what happened, or there's these conversations that might have happened but didn't. And so we have to be very careful when we're looking at this. So, you know, by a week after the debate, I was like, all right, that's enough. You know, you all have dissected this thing longer than I can stomach anymore. But I have seen very little bit of writing about all the lies that Trump told at that debate. And there was no correction when he was talking about COVID and so many other things that I was frustrated. So I do think that we have to be careful about the news that we are looking at and knowing that there is some bias in the media, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah. You know, certainly there was a lot of contention in terms of the way that the debate was covered. As you said, Trump told a lot of lies. There was not a lot of correction. In fact, there were so many lies you didn't have time in real time to actually correct it. That would have made it a much longer debate than what it was. I'm wondering, Tamia, in your estimation, what can the Democrats do in order to uphold Biden, perhaps? Or what can they do that can make it a better situation? Because not everybody is fully on board. And it seems to me like there's a lot of work that Biden has to do, even within his party, in order to make sure that he's buttressed so that people understand he's got support from within.
Yes, and that's the important piece there, is that the party needs to unify together and rally around President Biden. When Trump stood there and lied, the Republicans still stayed, what do the kids say, 10 toes down for him, and we need to do the same thing. You know, it wasn't a great situation, but at the end of the day, campaigns always have setbacks. I've been on several campaigns now to know this. And the best way to move forward is to come together and support the candidate that we have. And I know that the Senate is meeting, I know that the House is meeting, and I'm hoping that after these meetings, there is a real coordinated effort with them and the campaigns to unify our party so that when we get to Chicago, we are ready and rallied around our presidential and vice presidential nominees.
And speaking of the vice president, here's one that I want to kick back out to the panel. What do you think is going on with this whole non-support for Vice President Kamala Harris? She is next in line, but because she is next in line, I'm hearing a lot of Black women talk about how, well, this is what happens to me at the office, Dr. Malveaux. This is kind of par for the course. Even though I'm next in line, nobody is lifting me up and making sure that I'm getting what I am owed. What's being talked about in your circles, Dr. Malveaux, in terms of this treatment that we see the vice president getting when we know that she would be the next person in line if it ever came to that?
Well, you know, my colleagues all have these experiences in academia, in corporate America, of being next in line and then being skipped over, or in fact, training the junior white boy who then gets the job they thought they were going to get. So it's commonplace to dismiss Black women. As Malcolm said, nobody is more disrespected than the Black woman. And we see that literally every day. But beyond that, I mean, I think that with Vice President Harris, there was always the racism and sexism in our country is such that part of the narrative that some are spinning is, well, she can't win. Well, white America won't vote for her. So you're going to go out of line and go, Gretchen Whitmer, bless her soul, just said she's not running. Take her name out of it. I'm sure Gavin Newsom, my California colleague, about as hungry as never mind. But anyway, he's in California, so I don't know. He would love to have it, but he's been a good team player heretofore. Helm Makongo was laughing because he knows me. I edited myself on Makongo. I definitely edited myself. But some of these names that are being passed around, Pete Buttigieg is a great guy, but he's not ready. Come on now. Would you lift him up over the sitting vice president? So people are really talking about what will happen if the vice president is passed over. How will Black women, the most reliable vote that the Democrats have, how will Black women react and respond? And I promise you, there are a whole, I will vote, I'm a yellow dog Democrat, which means I will vote for a yellow dog if it was a Democrat. So I'll vote for the top of the ticket, but I'm not going to be a happy camper if what ends up happening is that our vice president is passed over. Quite frankly, right now, I think that President Biden, he's got to get out and talk to people. He's got to get calling members of Congress, and he's going here and going there. Go to the hood, go to the Union Hall, go to some of the places where people have been reluctant, and I think he can shore himself up. And if he doesn't, there's a very worthy number two, and people should stop trash talking our vice president because she is our elected vice president, and the dollars in the Biden-Harris campaign, she's the only one who has a right to them if President Biden chooses not to run.
To me, I think looking at this, even if this talk of looking at someone else for a vice presidential candidate did come through, it would be a total mess. I mean, I think that that's something that for some people might sound good in thought, but really playing that out, that's a mess, is it not?
Yes, it is. Even switching is messy. And I think if the party leadership were smart, and there have been a lot of comments about the fact that she was skipped over when there were lists even being made, to discredit the Black woman who helped secure the presidency last time is just disrespectful. And trying to put someone else new in is also very messy in that the Biden campaign has raised hundreds of millions of dollars. And you also have to think about building a full-scale presidential campaign, a new campaign in a month, and to have that run from August to November, that's messy and dangerous. And I think that's a failed strategy. So really people they can have all the fun they want in trying to figure out who else is running. I love that Governor Whitmer said, I'm not doing this. And just to keep herself out of it, because it just creates chaos. And we don't need chaos right now. We actually need unity and order. And we need to be able to come together. And as Dr. Malveaux said, he needs to be able to talk to the people, and the speculation about who could come in, that's not for now. That's for another time. And this is our candidate, and we've got to move forward because we're wasting time. The Trump campaign is gaining ground, and the Biden campaign needs to really be doing that too instead of dealing with this distraction.
Right. And the more people that step away, like the governor, the less chaos, or else you're just going to have the media, Gavin, speculating over and over again about what if. So being a part of the media, what is it that you're hearing? Because the media is getting blamed a lot for messaging, for information that might be confusing. When you are working and speaking with those around you, what is it that you aim to do when you actually cover these types of stories that you may not see other people doing in other media outlets?
So I'll say this, a majority of my journalism is focused on opinion pieces. So I don't want to suggest that, I'm necessarily covering this story at the moment as a reporter. I'm covering it certainly on my own social media handles and sharing my thoughts, in platforms like these. But I think it's really important that we have people who look like us who are covering this story because, as was mentioned a moment ago, and a lot of the early lists that were being generated as to who might be able to step in should President Biden step aside, I was astounded to see the vice president's name left off of those. And we really shouldn't be surprised by that just because of the biases that we know exist in the media. And we've seen the unfair treatment of Vice President Harris for a very long time now. I think a lot of journalists have been, waiting for moments like these where they can continue, to discredit the vice president who, if you just look on social media right now, what are a lot of the clips that we're seeing surface? We're seeing, the gaffes. We're seeing as people call it, the quote unquote word salad. It's utterly disrespectful. What I'm not seeing on social media are the hundreds and thousands of clips that exist of the vice president, like how she spoke at Essence Fest over the weekend. I think we might cover this a little bit later today, prosecuting the case against Donald Trump like few people I've heard ever do. And so I call on those who are reporting this story to lift up the vice president and what she's doing and how she's speaking truth to power when it comes to prosecuting the case against Donald Trump, when it comes to prosecuting the case against other MAGA Republicans, when it comes to speaking truth to power around protecting our fundamental rights and freedoms, like reproductive rights, like a whole host of other rights and freedoms that are right now under attack by those on the right. And so I call on journalists and those who are even just talking about this issue on social media or with others around you to do so with integrity, to do so with respect for the vice president.
Yeah, and then Dr. Dubinga, I mean, if you don't get the news, because we get news that's put in our face all the time, but then our responsibility comes when we have to go out and create a narrative for ourselves to understand what's really going out there. We just can't wait for the news to fall into our laps. You really have to research to understand what all these candidates are doing. So I think part of it also falls on the voters.
Absolutely. And that's something that bothers me. For people who live in D.C. in 2018, I ran for city council. And if you blinked your eyes, you missed my campaign. So long it lasted. But I remember I was out there on the street trying to talk to somebody about, why they should, vote for me and the like. And she literally did not stop walking. And she said, I don't do that politics stuff. And I'm like, I just never forgot that. And as many of us have said on the show, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? And so like everything that we do in this world, from the toothpaste that we use to the road to the school taxes and why one school is funded better, it's all because of people that we send to office. And so this lack of, look, I understand the Biden-Harris campaign needs to do more. I understand they need to get out there more. Everything that was said to here, go to the hood. I get all of that. But there's a certain level of sophistication that's supposed to be expected from the voters as well. And I feel like people have used the fact that Biden is not literally knocking on their door as an excuse to be like, well, I'm not going to support this guy. Like, you can look up the legislation. You can look up the laws. You can look up presidential records. Like, we argue more about who's the NBA or NFL or WNBA MVP and cite all of those stats, but can't cite the stats about Biden versus Trump on black colleges, on diabetes, on student loans, and so on and so forth. And so I'm calling for all the voters out there to do exactly what you were just talking about, Candace, and do your research. I remember a story I saw about one guy who said he's not voting for Biden, and then all of a sudden $80,000 in loans got forgiven, and now he's hosting events to educate people about Biden's agenda. Like, that's the type of stuff that we need to be doing. It's not either or, it's both and.
Yeah. And that'll do it. Pay off somebody's loans. You're probably going to host an event yourself. Listen, we have more. I know that, Tamia, you're going to be with us for a little bit more. So stay with us. You are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered here on the Black Star Network. See you on the other side of the break.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is RolandSMartin.com.
Me, Sherry Shepard, with Sammy Roman.
I'm Dr. Robin B., pharmacist and fitness coach, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
All right, we are back talking about the Biden and that voting anxiety that a lot of people seem to have. California Congresswoman Maxine Waters was on a panel at the Essence Festival of Culture where she completely dismissed the notion that President Biden's age should be a factor in running for re-election.
We're now at a point in time where people are talking about Biden is too old. Hell, I'm older than Biden.
You look good, Congresswoman.
And I get up every morning.
All right.
And I exercise.
All right.
And I work late hours.
All right.
I take care of black people.
All right.
Trump has told you who he is. He defined himself. He is a no good, deplorable, lying, despicable human being. And he's talking about if he doesn't win, there's going to be a bloodbath. There's going to be violence. There's going to be a civil war. Who the hell do you think he's coming after? Who's going to be targeted? Who is he talking about? But you know he means business because he is the one that led the invasion on the Capitol January 6th. Now, do we have to talk about the difference between these two? Now, I want to tell you, no matter what anybody says, it ain't going to be no other Democratic candidate. It's going to be Biden, and we better know it.
Tamia, here's what we know. Somewhere in the universe, someone's printing up some T-shirts talking about how Trump is despicable and deplorable. I can assure you that. But what you said, I would imagine more of that is needed in terms of Maxine Waters.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a term for that on the campaigns. We call them surrogates, people who go out and deliver the message and campaign on your behalf. And that was, she nailed it. You know, I saw it earlier this morning and I was like, yes, this is the message that needs to get out there, which is at the end of the day, we are too caught up in age and we need to really be caught up with what's at stake. And Auntie Maxine, she's always called out Trump since before he was elected the first time. And having her out there and reconnecting with folks on this particular issue with this campaign, it's perfect. And you see Congressman Horsford next to her laughing because he knows, like, this is exactly it's the truth. And it's what's needed. It's what the people need to hear. Let's reset. Let's get back to reality here. Things will be dangerous. Trump has said so. And when he said he was going to do certain things before he got elected, what is the first thing that he did when he was elected? He put a ban on Muslims coming to the United States. And he wasn't as emboldened, as empowered as he is now. And if he gets reelected, we're going to see worse. And we need to keep that in the front of our minds. Oh, I'm not so excited about who's on the ballot. Okay, are you excited about keeping yourself safe? Let's go ahead and just let's make sure he's not president again.
Yeah. Dr. Malvoy, I want to throw this to you. I know that you have been down to the Essence Festival of Culture. This is the place where you do go to get people talking.
Absolutely. And the stage is always hot. This is, I mean, I'm happy that Kamala was there, but I wish that President Biden could have been there as well. That's the kind of retail politics that he's so good at, touching people, empathizing with people. But sisters are there, sisters and brothers. A lot of folks are there, and it's hot, hot, hot. And it's hot in New Orleans, too. But it's hot, hot, hot. And so these are the kind of things that I think he very much needs to do. When I listened to Congresswoman Waters, I could call her Maxine because she's my friend. When I listened to her, I thought about, who came to my mind was Dr. Dorothy Irene Height. Dr. Height was 98 when she made her transition in 2010. Until only a few months before she made her transition, she went to the office Ed Day. Do you hear me? Ed Day. And she went in there clean as the Board of Health with her hat and gloves on. And I never saw her slow up. As a matter of fact, there was one occasion where actually she had more stamina than me. We had gone to some event and there was an after party and she said, "Do you want to go to the after party?" I'm like, no. I don't think so. She said, well, it would be rude for us not to go. I'm like, the Height, really? It's 1 o'clock in the morning. And she said, oh, come on, let's go. So we went. She's an elder. She was an elder, but she believed in our people and she went where she needed to be. President Biden doesn't quite have that stamina, but he has that willpower. So you can't write off people because they're elder. Because I mean, we have to have an intergenerational society. And what Joe Biden has probably got more than these fools who are talking about him leaving have ever known. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he knows public policy. He knows what he's doing. And so I think that, you know, having him at the Essence Fest would have been a coup. I don't know what's going on. I did not like what I saw today with those aggressive reporters harassing Karine, the press secretary. It was one guy who just was really out of order, trying to get her to say something. She said 3 times, I can't say that. But they're trying to put people in a box to say something is wrong with President Biden. And what they need to say is, what's right with President Biden? And what's wrong with that orange man? I would encourage everybody who has some doubts to read Project 2025. Now, you don't have to read the whole thing because it's 900 pages. It is 900 pages, so you really don't want to read the whole thing. You probably will upchuck at least 5 times as you go through the first 20 pages. But they laid it out. Number one, they would eliminate the civil service. All these civil service jobs, they say, these should be presidential appointees. Do you know between 38,000 and 50,000 people work for civil service? And all of us know a disproportionate number of them are African Americans. And African Americans, in terms of employment, are paid better with civil service than they are in the regular labor market. So they would get rid of that. They would get rid of, the Supreme Court has already got rid of the regulatory agencies. I mean, I could go down the list, I won't. But all I would say to people, or just read a summary, or go on my webpage. I have a column where I lay it out. We do not need to be ignorant. And that lying person, I'm cleaning myself up over Congo. You're influencing me positively. But that lying person, he doesn't know anything about Project 2025. He is a liar and a coot. To go back and he lies more easily. My grandmother used to say to one of my relatives who was a liar, she said, why tell the truth what a lie will do? And that's him. I mean, why not just lie? Just lie.
But you know what? I would say a lot of people
Project 2025 and Ben Carson has a chapter in there. Steve Miller has a chapter in there. All his cronies have chapters in there. So don't tell me, don't what on me and tell me that it's raining.
Even if you get to the table of contents of that 922-page report, you are correct. Just the first few pages are very telling. Now I have several questions for you, Dr. Debinga, but I will start with this one. Do you think that it is time for health records of all the parties to be released? I know that Joe Biden has released some, and he says that he sees doctors every day. But do you think there should be something a little more formal from both candidates on a continuous basis leading up to the election on both sides, perhaps to make it fair?
Well, all I care about as it relates to that question is that it is fair and that it's equal, and that if one person has to do it, the other person has to do it or face the same consequences. As Biden said this morning in the call with Morning Joe, is that, since February, he released everything. So do people need it daily? Do they need it hourly? Do they need it weekly? He said he had a cold and other things and got checked out today. But do we remember when Donald Trump's doctor, who he affectionately called Ronnie Johnson, and his name is Ronnie Jackson, at a rally when he was standing right there? Ronnie Jackson says something to the effect of, President Trump is the most fit president in the history of presidents, or something to that effect. And people just let that fly. Like, how does this guy, like I said, back when Trump was president, how does this guy even have a medical license still, right? And so that's what I'm talking about. The inconsistency is a problem. People have let them lie about Trump's height and his weight and all of these other types of things. And so I think that it's actually ridiculous that there's not a same standard. And let me just end with this, Candace. We're talking about seeing the same health records. We've also have never seen Trump's taxes. And Biden has released all of those. And so I'm saying there's never been a consistent playing field as opposed to the expectations, and have the level playing field and have consequences for both of them for not doing what has been said. But don't just have it on Biden to do this.
To me, what do you make of this Project 25? Certainly Trump has been trying to stay the distance away from it. He says that he knows nothing of it. However, at the same time, he says that he doesn't agree with what's in it. Those two can't happen at the same time. As Dr. Malveaux said, just read the first couple of pages and you know exactly where this is going and who's involved. Dr. Ben Carson has been on the campaign trail with Donald Trump. It seems to me that at some point they would have parsed that conversation about his 922-page document. What are your thoughts about all of this?
I couldn't agree with Dr. Malveaux more. I started reading it and it made me feel sick. And I was like, I cannot believe that this is where they want to see the country go. If people are also looking for a summary, the Biden campaign does have it on their website. It's really dangerous what they're trying to do and really completely change the way that we govern. And as it was mentioned, you have thousands of employees that are working for the government that are Black, that they are basically trying to discriminate against. They've continuously talked about smaller government, smaller government, smaller government. And we know what that means. That means cutting people from doing the work. And we have to remember the importance of federal workers. Even just with that recent Supreme Court case with, cutting down on regulation, like we need the FDA to make sure our food is safe. We need the Environmental Protection Agency to make sure we're actually breathing in clean air. And these are the things that are super important to keep us functioning on a day-to-day basis. And we know, unfortunately, in many instances, lower income communities suffer more from environmental discrimination and neglect, and also with healthcare. And then that also comes with the economy. All those things are connected. And if you don't have money, how can you pay to take care of yourself? And so when they're standing here trying to cut these different departments and these different programs that help aid and support, particularly people of color and low income Americans, it's frustrating to say the least. And it's frankly ridiculous. And I think that Trump is trying to distance himself from it right now because it's an unbelievable read. I didn't read all 900, but I read enough of a summary to know that this is actually scary, and you can't believe that someone actually thinks, or a group of people got together and said, this is what we're going to do as we move forward. And he's distancing himself because he doesn't want people to pay attention. But in actuality, this is the plan that they're going to do. The Heritage Foundation, the conservative think tank, is behind this. And we just really have to be aware of that and know that, again, I always am going to end with this point, that we have to vote, because that's the only way to not even have to deal with this reality that they're trying to put together.
No, that's right. Gavin, I think one of the things that I've been hearing from a few people today is, well, you know what, this report certainly has opened my eyes, and maybe it translates into people being more inspired to do more in order to get people to the ballot box, and in order to make sure that they understand what is going on in this world that is affecting them. Do you get this sense that perhaps this report might rally some folks up to do a little more?
Absolutely. Look, the stakes of this election could not be any higher. Project 2025 is one piece of evidence validating that theory. Another is the recent Supreme Court decision that was handed down, I guess that was last week, which essentially says that a president can do anything he or she wishes to, as long as it's in their official capacity, and they'll face no criminal liability. This essentially, as we prepare to celebrate July 4th, which is when our nation, got our independence from the British Crown, the decision essentially gave the American president the ability to act as a king or a queen. In a second Donald Trump presidency, that means that Donald Trump can literally carry out not only the terrible policies, the borderline illegal policies, in some cases straight up illegal policies contained in the pages of Project 2025, he could also order the assassination of his political opponents, whether they be Joe Biden, whether they be me, who was a political appointee in his administration, could be literally anybody, and he would face no criminal liability. So whether it's Project 2025 or whether it's the recent Supreme Court decision, the stakes of this election could not be any higher. However, I do believe that it's going to be imperative for the Biden campaign to not only continue to beat the drum about the stakes of this election and what Donald Trump is prepared to do in a second presidency, in a second term. I think it's imperative that the Biden campaign put forward an affirmative vision for what they seek to deliver for especially the Black community in a second term. We talked earlier about how the president needs to get out there to communities like Atlanta and Philly and Milwaukee and Detroit, and he's going. But we need more of that. We need Joe Biden to make a very clear and convincing case to Black voters, not only that Donald Trump is racist and a threat to our community, which he is, but we know that. Joe Biden needs to make a clear and convincing case continue to do that for what we will get from a second Joe Biden presidency. Like I said earlier, the Biden presidency so far has contained a historic list of accomplishments for our community, whether it's a historic rate of Black small business growth, a historic rate of historically low Black unemployment, or record low caps on prescription drugs for seniors when it comes to insulin, for diabetes, which disproportionately is Black seniors. I believe the list is extremely long. But I want to hear from the president as he continues to get out there and travel and speak and engage with Black voters more that he plans to do in a second term. I've heard him talk extensively about free childcare, universal pre-K. I love some of these ideas, continuing his mission of delivering for the middle class. So I think he should continue to do that. I think he will, but it's going to be critical to make sure that Black voters not only recognize the danger of a second Donald Trump presidency, but also the incredible benefits that our community can glean in a second Joe Biden presidency.
All right, I'm going to wrap up with you, Tamia, before we let you go. Just your final word, final thoughts about what we are seeing unraveling today. We had Gavin that mentioned this big Supreme Court case. What's going on with democracy? If you would we have about 30 seconds in terms of what people should keep in mind when they go to those polls.
Yes, and it's really about making sure that we keep democracy together, and that is important. And it's everything that we talked about. I'm trying to do this all in 30 seconds. It's keeping ourselves safe and protected, and able to keep our freedoms, and that's important. As I mentioned before, our ancestors died for these freedoms to be able to participate in the democratic process. We need to continue to do the same thing, and that really is voting for the Democratic candidate in this instance, and it would be President Biden. Thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely. Tamia D. Booker, founder and managing editor of T. Booker Strategies, thank you for all of your insight.
All right, take care.
All right, and stay with us. You are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered here on the Black Star Network. See you on the other side of the break.
On the next Get Wealthy, financial therapy, what it is and why it may be exactly what you need.
So when you think about financial therapy, what we're talking about is how do we learn to live with our money in a way that is congruent with our values, that we understand our emotions about money, we understand our beliefs and our behaviors.
That's right here, only on Black Star Network.
On a next, A Balanced Life, it takes a village to raise a child, and truer words have never been spoken. If you're raising a child, you know that it's a blessed challenge like no other. Even more so if your child has a disability. We'll talk to parents and our expert panelists about the best way forward for your child to help you maintain your own sanity. On a next, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie on Black Star Network.
Me, Sherry Shepard, and you know what you're watching, Roland Martin Unfiltered.
All right, Vice President Kamala Harris was also in New Orleans for the 30th Essence Festival of Culture. She sat down with Essence CEO and President Caroline Wanga. Harris expressed to the audience the importance of November's election.
This is probably the most significant election of our lifetime. You know, we have said it every 4 years, but this here one is it. We are looking at an election that will take place in 122 days.
122.
Where on one side, you have the former president who is running to become president again, who has openly talked about his admiration of dictators and his intention to be a dictator on day one, who has openly talked about his intention to weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies, who has talked about being proud of taking from the women of America a most fundamental right to make decisions about your own body. And then last week, understand, sadly, the press has not been covering it as much as they should in proportion to the seriousness of what just happened, when the United States Supreme Court essentially told this individual who has been convicted of 34 felonies that he will be immune from essentially the activity he has told us he is prepared to engage in if he gets back into the White House. Understand what we all know. In 122 days, we each have the power to decide what kind of country we want to live in. Understand what we know. When there has been a full-on intentional attack against hard-fought, hard-won freedoms and rights. When I talk about the family that raised me, yes, they took me in a stroller as they were marching and shouting for justice, knowing that justice will not be achieved unless we are prepared to march and shout and fight for it. And one of the ways we do that is through our vote. This here election, let's think about the significance of the United States Supreme Court. 2 years ago and some days now, we commemorated a decision by the United States Supreme Court, the Dobbs decision, that undid the protections of Roe v. Wade. Understand how that happened. The former president, who wants to be president again, hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade, and they did as he intended. The Court of Thurgood and RBG took a most fundamental right, the right to make decisions about your own body. And on this subject, I think we all believe and know one does not have to abandon their faith and deeply held beliefs to agree the government should not be telling her what to do with her body. If she chooses, she will talk with her priest or her pastor, her rabbi, her imam, but the government should not be telling her what to do. Understand that the former president, who is up for re-election, has said he is proud of what has happened, proud of the fact that our daughters will have fewer rights than their grandmothers, that we have seen in state after state, they're passing laws punishing healthcare providers, in Texas providing for prison for life for a doctor or nurse who provides reproductive care. Understand, laws being passed and proposed that make no exception for rape or incest. Caroline, you asked me about the things that have influenced my career.
That's exactly right.
So many of you know I was a prosecutor. You may not know one of the reasons why. When I was in high school, I learned that my best friend was being molested by her stepfather. And when I learned, I said to her, you have to come live with us. I called up my mother. My mother said, of course she does. And she came and she lived with us. So I decided at a young age, I wanted to take on what I could do to protect women and children against violence. The idea that these so-called leaders would be passing laws that make no exception for rape and incest, that are essentially telling a survivor of a crime of violence to their body, a violation of their body, that they have no right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That's immoral. And that's what's happening in our country right now. You look at the taking of fundamental freedoms and rights. In Georgia, passed a law to deny people and make it more difficult to have freedom to access to the ballot. Passed a law that makes it illegal to essentially give people food and water for standing in line to vote. The hypocrisy abounds. What happened to love thy neighbor?
So if you want to see more of the entire conversation, we streamed it on the Black Star Network. You know, Dr. Dibinga, she has been out there and she has been talking this talk for a very long time. She has been hitting panels, she's been hitting schools, she's been talking about this issue that you think would make a lot of people rise to the occasion. How effective do you think she has been, especially on this trail as she's talking about abortion rights and women? What's your sense of how that is making a difference?
I think it's absolutely making a difference. I believe that she was the first vice president or something to that effect to visit a facility that provides abortions, something to that effect. You know, she's even outside of this issue, which we're, you know, dealing with right now, she's been the Biden campaign's and administration's best weapon. And I'm glad that she's out there, because now we can stop calling her, you know, the best kept secret or the secret weapon. She's out there on Front Street, and to be able to have a woman speak to this, that's just something that Trump can't do. It's something that Biden can't do. And while we're at it, we still haven't seen Trump's VP pick, right? And so what I appreciate about her is that she's using every tool that she has, including who she is physically, to be able to draw attention to things in ways that other people can't. You know, I can talk about it, other people can talk about it, but, you know, she has lived this, she has seen this, she's had these conversations with women, and the fact of the matter is, when she is up there on that stage, she is going to bring a perspective that so many of us just don't think about because we don't have to. And when she does that, the people at home who are living with these particular issues, you know, when I'm talking directly as it relates to women, and of course, you know, men, husbands who are involved as well, but I'm talking about the people going directly through it, they can resonate with that. And I think that is very powerful. She needs to do more of it. And lastly, I will say, as people keep saying, if this becomes a referendum on Biden, Democrats lose. If it becomes a referendum on Trump, Democrats win. And so what she's doing with this abortion issue is she is also keeping it front and center, because this is an issue that Democrats have won and referendum across the country over the last few years. And so that helps put the attention on Trump and other Republicans who have been trying to run away from that. Just look at the platform they released today. They responded to the pressure that people have put as it relates to that. And so she is the best weapon out there to speak on it.
So Gavin, this really is your wheelhouse, right? So you have written speeches for the vice president. You know her style. You know how she gets down. I want to put you back in that arena where you are with her. What is the conversation that is being had about what she should say and how she should reach voters at this time? Certainly what she says extemporaneously is important, but as a speechwriter, I know too that is important. What's your input and what you see in all of this?
Absolutely. So, you know, the job of a speechwriter, above all, of course, you have to be an excellent writer to be a good speechwriter. But above all, you have to be able to put yourself in the mind of your principal. You know, someone like Vice President Harris was very easy to write for, I'll say, because she's been doing this for so long. She's been fighting for women and children and families. She's been fighting for, you know, average Americans throughout her whole entire career. She knows what she wants to say before she even says it. She knows what she wants to say before we can even put the words on the paper. And so that, I think, was so special, was what was so special about writing for the vice president, is that, for example, I'll take you through, you know, writing a speech on the issue of reproductive freedom, right? I think what the vice president really cares a lot about is sharing the stories of everyday Americans. So, for example, before the vice president delivered a speech in North Carolina commemorating the, I believe it was the 50th anniversary of the 50th anniversary of the overturning, no, the 50th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, excuse me. She spoke in North Carolina, and it was very important for us. It was very important for the vice president to ensure that that speech contained the stories of real women who've been affected by this issue. And so I had the opportunity to hop on a call with a woman who was denied essential life-saving reproductive care at a hospital in Florida. Literally drove to the emergency room because she needed to have her pregnancy terminated. She was literally about to bleed out and die. But the physician said, sorry, because of the laws that are in place, we can't do that for you. So this woman ended up driving to a hair salon. Why? Because she feared that she was on the doorstep of death and did not want her mother to have to take her body to get her hair done for her own casket. So she took herself to the hair salon to get herself ready for her own death. Went to the bathroom in that hair salon and nearly bled out and died and had a miscarriage in that salon bathroom. So I had the chance to talk to this woman. I had the chance to get her story. And with her permission, the vice president shared her story during the speech that she gave. Not only that, but the vice president made sure that that woman was at the speech that she gave so that she could personally greet her and thank her for sharing her story with us before the speech. And she gave her a shout out during the speech because she was there in the stands. And that's the kind of speaker Vice President Harris is. She's someone who knows that it's the real stories, it's the everyday stories of the people touched by these issues that make a speech truly special. And since leaving the vice president's team, I've continued to see the vice president employ that same approach, whether it's speaking not only on the issue of reproductive freedom, but also speaking about economic opportunity, economic justice. She went on a tour earlier this year, I believe we spoke about it on this very show, in which she went to cities like Atlanta and Detroit and talked about the work that this administration is doing to expand access to capital to Black and brown folks, whether they be entrepreneurs or other folks who are reliant on capital that have been denied to them and those in our community for so long. And so I've seen her do this not only while I was with her, but I've seen her do it since I've left her office. And it makes me very proud. And I think Omokongo is so correct in that she is one of the most effective ambassadors on so many issues. And I'm excited to see this campaign continue to lean on her because she truly is no longer one of the best kept secrets.
Right. The secret is out. The secret's out.
The secret's out.
Yeah, and certainly she's getting a lot of light that's being shined on her, Dr. Malveaux. I think that part of the growth that I have seen with Vice President Kamala Harris is the personal touch that she has really geared up, and those stories that Gavin was talking about are really hitting home now. And I think that when we think about her now, I know I do, when I think about her, I think about more of a personal touch. And that's changed from when she first took office. And I think that that's a good thing, obviously.
We've seen enormous growth in her in these past 3.5 years. But let's be clear, she's already a rock star. I mean, she won statewide election. People talk about she can't win because she's Black female. Well, she won statewide election in California. She's always been a good speaker. I think that because of her race and gender, some of the haters have drilled down on, the term word salad, we won't use it on this network, but they had at least really silly things to say about her without listening to what she was saying. But so while we've seen enormous growth, I think it's also important to note that she was already a rock star. She was already doing it. I think the choice issue, Gavin is absolutely, the choice issue is, I forget one of my brothers raised that choice issue in her context, but she's uniquely situated as a prosecutor, as a woman of color, to talk about how denying women their right to choose is uniquely not only painful, but also personal. The politicians shouldn't be in this. This is a woman's decision about her body. And she communicates that far more effectively than many others do. I just hope that I think that, of course, Black women are paying attention. I hope that Black men are paying attention to understand what they have at stake when women don't have bodily autonomy, because it's not just a women's issue, it's a family issue. We can look at a number of things, and other economic indicators that talk about what happens when women have abortions, what they lose, not only in terms of, not what they lose in terms of abortion, but when they are forced to take a pregnancy to term, what they lose. I mean, imagine that you're a poor woman who becomes inadvertently pregnant and you have to keep the baby. Now, what you gonna do with that baby? And you're not gonna love up on that baby but so much, perhaps. Some folks are like, I don't like this baby. This baby was not my choice. I know people who have given their children up for adoption, which was probably the best thing in their case. But in any case, there are economic reverberations to denying a woman a right to choose, including her employment situation, any number of other things. But I think that the vice president is far better situated to raise some of these issues and the economic issues. The economic development tour was great, but far better situated to raise these than some other people. So I think that the Biden-Harris administration has gotten it, that she is basically an effective tool. I don't think they got it at first, but we all know that the role of the vice president is always very nebulous. I mean, if you look at the Constitution, it doesn't lay out, this is what your job is. The president picks what your job is, and they create your portfolio, whether you want it or not. And we've seen really smart people. I give Al Gore an example. Very smart man. Well, he got the internet. He nailed that. But he was not able to transform his vice presidency into an effective campaign because of the nebulous nature of the work he did. So I think that just because of what's going on with that orange man, she's been able to very effectively communicate, and the Biden administration, both of them need to be running like they stole something in these next few days.
Yeah, we know that when she first got into office, she got some really bad assignments when it comes to that border wall. And you're right, there's nothing in the Constitution that says specifically what she should be doing. They get it. She got it on a plate for her, served to her. And what was on that plate, a lot of it certainly didn't look good, but she certainly keeps on rising to the occasion. All right, more on Roland Martin Unfiltered when we come back after this break. You are watching the Black Star Network. Stay with us.
Next on the Black Table with me, Greg Carr. Dr. Gerald Horne, a man regarded by many as the most important historian of our time. He provides us a history lesson I'm betting you've never heard before.
Texas enslavers who planned to continue the conflict even after Appomattox, even after the formal surrender of Robert E. Lee.
Dr. Horne talks about his new book, The Counter-Revolution of 1836, Texas, Slavery, and Jim Crow, and the Roots of U.S. Fascism. You do not want to miss this conversation. Only on the Black Table, right here on the Black Star Network.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.
Hey, it's John Murray, the executive producer of the new Sherry Shepherd Talk Show. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
All right, a Philadelphia radio host has been fired after a controversial interview with President Biden. WURD, an independent Black-owned talk radio station, landed Biden's first interview following the June 27th presidential debate. During a CNN interview, the station's host, Andrea Lawful Sanders, admitted to asking Biden questions at the White House that the White House had sent her in advance.
You each you asked 4 questions, and maybe that's what you were allowed to ask by the campaign or the White House. But they were essentially the same questions, both interviews, about accomplishments, progress in your respective state, what's at stake in the election, what he has to say about his debate performance, and what he would say to voters who think their vote doesn't matter or might sit this election out. Were those questions given to you by the White House, or did you have, or the campaign, or did you have to submit questions ahead of this interview?
The questions were sent to me for approval. I approved them.
Okay, so the White House sent the questions to you ahead of the interview?
Yes.
Okay.
I got several questions, 8 of them, and the 4 that were chosen were the ones that I approved.
All right, so that did not sit well with the radio station. Here's a part of the statement that the station posted on social media about the incident. WRD Radio remains an independent voice that our audience can trust, will hold elected officials accountable. As Pennsylvania's only independent Black-owned radio talk show station, WURD Radio has cultivated that trust in our audience over our 20-year history. This is something we take very seriously. Agreeing to a predetermined set of questions jeopardizes that trust and is not a practice that WURD Radio engages in or endorses as a matter of practice or official policy. As Pennsylvania's only independent Black-owned talk radio station, WURD Radio has cultivated that trust with our audience over a 20-year history. This is something we take very seriously, and agreeing to this, I think that we already went through that. This is something to take seriously. Agreeing to a premeditated set of questions jeopardizes trust and is not a practice that WRD Radio engages in or endorses as a matter of official policy. I think that was doubled there. Let me go to you, Gavin. What are your thoughts about what this host should or should not have done?
So I think this is a really tough story. Certainly, when I first saw this interview between Andrea and Victor Blackwell, I did not think that the story would have the outcome that it did. I guess having been inside, the room and in the building in terms of in the political space and seeing how this often works, I guess my perspective is that it's not entirely uncommon for the staff, supporting a certain principle to go back and forth with reporters and journalists in seeking to set up or line up an interview to establish the guardrails or parameters or scope of a particular, interview. Nor is it necessarily uncommon for questions to sort of be massaged, back and forth, again, between the staff supporting a principal and a potential journalist seeking to interview that host. It's not entirely uncommon. It's really not an uncommon practice. I think right now, though, we're at a situation in which a lot of Americans are looking for truth and are looking for clarity and are looking for transparency from the president as to, how he handles more off the cuff, non-scripted, non-teleprompter, sort of exchanges. And so I think it was sort of the perfect storm in the scenario where listeners were, I suppose, hoping to hear the president just sort of, responding in real time to questions without, knowing beforehand what those questions would be. Clearly, the policy of this radio station is that the way in which this reporter conducted herself was not in line with the policies of the radio station. I certainly am not one to, I can't comment on the extent to which what she did truly, did or did not conflict with the policies, nor,
Right.
should I second guess the decision that was made by this radio station. I guess speaking in generalities, I would hope that, this is a Black-owned radio station, serving, for Black listeners by Black reporters. I guess my hope would be that in a situation like this, again, without knowing the specifications, the specifics here, that perhaps there could have been a way to deal with the situation without terminating, the reporter here. Again, I do not know the nature or the relationship that, the reporter has with this radio station, but I guess I would hope that there could have been another way to resolve this situation without terminating this reporter.
Gavin, I think a lot of people are thinking about just the process of the behind the scenes. Dr. Dibinga, it seems as though, yes, often journalists go on TV and they talk about the guidelines and they talk about, how the sausage is made. They talk about what goes on behind the scenes. I'm just wondering why she went on this show. Was there permission? And was there even a discussion just in terms of leadership and policy? I just think that there are a lot of holes that need to be filled in because she went on the show for some reason. Perhaps she thought she had the green light, ended up at a red light after it was all said and done, though, Dr. Dibinga.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Kevin said, it's definitely unfortunate. And I found it, and it kind of goes back to the first part of our whole discussion, that people are nitpicking every single thing that Biden does, that they're reaching out to people who normally would not get any attention, right? When was the last time you saw a Black radio host be interviewed on CNN or MSNBC for an interview with the president, right? So I think she kind of got caught up in the whole frustration of what's going on with Biden and how everybody's watching his every single word. I think some news sites are like actually posting transcripts of his speeches so that people can actually kind of go through it word by word and look at where he slipped up. Like, we're in silly season as it relates to that, but they're not doing that for Trump, by the way. The thing that we have to be mindful of is that, again, this is something that happens all the time in radio. And going back to what Gavin said, it will depend on the standard set by the station. If their standard is, we don't do that, you don't take prepared questions, and she violated that, then it would make sense that she has to go. We saw this a couple of weeks ago. Remember, Candace, with Tyler, the singer, and the Breakfast Club, She went on the Breakfast Club, and she was like, her manager, don't ask about this, don't ask about that, don't ask about that. And Charlemagne asked about all of it. And so there's a certain level of integrity that stations are supposed to have. Karen Hunter talked about this. She said she would never take an interview where she can't ask the question she wants, but if somebody said you have to take our questions, she would deny the interview from the beginning and wouldn't do it. So it comes down to the integrity of the station, and it comes down to the integrity of the host. And if the integrity of the host and the integrity of the station are in conflict, then clearly ownership is going to win out, right, as it relates to that. And so I think it's an unfortunate situation all around. Clearly, this radio station has its standards, and they felt like they weren't met by her. But I think that we have to be careful as it relates to those of us in this media space in general to not nitpick every single thing. Biden has done 15 events since the debate, right? And it's still not enough for people. We can't keep nitpicking every single thing. The campaign's going to do what it's going to do. The radio stations are going to do what they're going to do. And we have to make sure that we're respecting that. And it doesn't seem like she did in this case.
Dr. Malveaux, was there a miss somewhere, you think, if you think about the host, what she did and what perhaps was happening in terms of policy, because they said that their policy is that they don't take questions ahead of time. So I'm just wondering if there was a misunderstanding about what the policy of the station even was, because it is strange that it ended up like this.
It is very strange. I have a radio talk show Monday mornings at 9 a.m. on WPFW. I think Oma Congo has been my guest once. And people do not tell me what I'm going to talk about. Now, people may suggest, I did today's Monday. So this morning I had Liz Harris from Poor People's Campaign, and I had a young lady who has been working on the Chevron case, the regulatory case. In her case, she sent me a couple of talking points because the Chevron case is very complicated to me. I'm not an attorney, but she sent me some talking points. But I asked her what I felt like asking her, which wasn't necessarily the talking points. But basically, people don't tell me what to say. It's going to come out some other kind of way. With Liz Harris, she's a close acquaintance. Reverend Barber is a friend. And it was fairly free-flowing. But I have people give me questions. I'm saying, we're not going to roll like that. I've read your bio. I've read your book. Let's just talk. But in politics, and when I used to do a lot of national television, one of the things that used to crack me up is you go on the air with a Republican, and they would have not only their talking points, they would be ordered. Democrats, we just say whatever. But Republicans are always very disciplined. So if you debated 3 Republicans in a week, they would all say the same thing. Just saying a lot, I don't know the backstory. I do know that WURD is a great station. It's owned by a Black family. The dad used to own it. He was a physician. Now the daughter is the CEO. Sarah Lomax. They're terrific people. So I just think there's something that we don't know. There's something that we don't know here, because this just doesn't seem egregious. Some of the questions that you would ask President Biden are questions anybody would ask him. I mean, you want to know how you felt about your debate. You want to know, what your accomplishments are. So I just think that there's something missing. But I'm sorry for the sister, and I'm sorry for the station. But no. Sister Girl said, I'm not a journalist. She made all these qualifiers. So I do think that there's a mismatch that we're not hearing about.
Yeah. I think they're also, and I'm in agreement that there is some information. I don't know if we will hear about it in a lawsuit, but I do not think that discussion, especially for her, since she lost her job, is over. All right, we've got more of Roland Martin Unfiltered right here on the Black Star Network. Stay with us.
Coming soon to the Black Star Network.
I still have my NFL contract in my house. I have it in a case. It's 4 of them, for my 4-year contract. I got a $600,000 signing bonus. My base salary for that first year was $150,000. Matter of fact, $150,000. $150,000. That's what I made. $150,000. Now think about it. My signing bonus was a forgivable loan, supposedly. When I got traded to the Colts, they made me pay back my signing bonus to them. I had to give them their $600,000 back. Wow. Yeah, I was so pissed. Because, I try to be a man of my word. I'm like, you, I'll give you your money back. Even though I know I earned that money, I gave them money back. I gave them $600,000 back. But yet, I was this malcontent. I was a bad guy. I'm about the money. It wasn't about the money. It was about doing right. Because I looked at, because you look at contract. Look at John Edwards. John Edwards was making $1 million, $800,000. I was making $150,000. I was doing everything. And I'm like, but yet I got so many letters, you so I just play for free and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you don't forget that kind of stuff. Right. That stuff is hurtful.
Farquhar, executive producer of Proud Family.
Bruce Smith, creator and executive producer of The Proud Family, Louder and Prouder. And you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
All right, jobless rates rise in June for white, black, and Hispanic women, but for men in the three racial groups, the black unemployment rate increased in June to 6.3%. The overall for June was 4.1%. Black men saw a dip, but the unemployment rate for black women rose 0.5 of a point from May. Now, while the overall unemployment rate slightly increased, June saw 206,000 jobs added to the workforce. Now, Morgan Harper from the American Economic Liberties Project is here to break down these numbers. We thank you so much, Morgan, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So when we look at all of these numbers, for people who aren't really numbers people, because we are always hearing about the unemployment rate, we've got a 0.5 of a point with the unemployment rate for black women. That's very minuscule. What is the overall takeaway when you look at these numbers, someone who can really decipher what they mean?
So overall, the job market and the employment status of Americans is in a pretty good place. So even as you noted in that overview, how we've seen an uptick, in the black unemployment rate, it's still at relatively historic low levels. And we've seen that pretty consistent throughout the entire Biden administration, that unemployment has been relatively low for us and across the board. But what we did see this past month in June is that there is this bit of an uptick, both in the general and the black specific unemployment rate. And that can mean a number of things. I mean, one, as I emphasize a lot, it's just a month. And then these numbers are sometimes revised down the line. So you got to take it all with a grain of salt. But it could mean that there is some slowing down in the labor market. But again, we've been living through a real labor boom since after the pandemic in terms of the level of new jobs being created, hiring, wages going up. And so what the government policymakers, and specifically at the Federal Reserve, are going to be looking for is this labor market slowing enough so that we can finally start to lower those interest rates? That's the connection between these unemployment numbers and the interest rates. And that's going to be really key, especially as we head closer to November, I think, because a lot of folks are looking at that, whether you're thinking about trying to buy a home. As we know, if you're trying to get a mortgage, these interest rates are very high. If you're a business owner and you're trying to borrow money, the interest rates are very high. And if you have existing debt that you're having to pay off, that also can be, causing a lot of stress financially. So, it's important to always keep these numbers in a broader context, that they're just discrete moments in time. A lot can change, but there certainly is enough here for us to say that we need to monitor this and see if there might be some ongoing slowdown in the labor market that could be a sign of other types of economic concerns.
Indeed, Morgan, these interest rates have stopped people in their tracks in terms of getting any type of property. What are your thoughts in terms of, if you could explain to the audience the shift that could potentially take place and what it takes for that shift to happen to bring down an interest rates or change the price? Remember, we were talking at one point about eggs and milk and the cost of that and bacon. But when we think about these shifts, those shifts can happen in a short period of time, perhaps, in terms of the change in interest rates.
Absolutely. And so all year we've been waiting for the Fed to lower interest rates. They've been saying, they meet quarterly, and there's always a lot of speculation about whether this is going to be the month. They said that likely in 2024 they were going to be lowering rates. And as we inch closer now towards we're past the halfway point of the year, it hasn't happened yet. And so we're running out of quarters for them to follow through on, that prediction. It does seem, and, a lot of folks are speculating after this latest report with that bit of slowdown, even though total jobs created was, pretty high, over 200,000 jobs created, that the unemployment rate was going down, that this might be the type of softening in the labor market that would start to make the Fed feel like, okay, we need to inject a little energy, so to speak, into this economy and lower interest rates, which would spur some of that other type of economic activity with the housing market, businesses, et cetera. Whether they do that, only time will tell. September would be the next time when they would have that opportunity. But it certainly seems like, based on this data, that they would have a fairly reasonable case for taking that route. And that would be something, like I said, that a lot of people have been anticipating, but you never know exactly what the Fed's going to do. In terms of the connection to prices, that's where I do think we need to consider the range of factors that can go into prices. So let's look at housing, for example.
Okay.
The interest rates being high, that does impact the price of mortgages. That could lead people to hold and not want to sell a house, make it difficult to buy a house. Although I don't know if you're seeing, I'm starting to see in Columbus, Ohio, where I live, a lot more houses on the market. I think people are starting to just move regardless of interest rates being somewhat stagnant now, because they need to get a bigger home if they've had another kid, whatever. But we also need to look at the full scope of what could be driving those housing prices. We've learned in this past year about how, there's been a software that was allowing landlords. So because it's not as easy now or as cheap to buy a house, a lot more people are stuck in rental situations than perhaps they'd want to be. And landlords are taking advantage of this. And they're not just taking advantage of it in a traditional supply and demand situation, which would be legal. There's only a limited amount of rental housing, and then you're going to increase the prices because more people maybe are staying in that market. They've also been using a software company that applies an algorithm that allows them to collude to keep prices of their units. And these are usually like the bigger landlords that own, multiple multifamily units, keep those rental prices artificially high to just kind of test the outer bounds of how much consumers and renters are willing to pay. So that is illegal. That is price fixing. And that is something that this Department of Justice is getting involved in. There's a class action about that, but then also Department of Justice has been getting involved to try to call that out. And that could help to then bring down some of those rental prices for the foreseeable future. So, it's really important. And that's true across a range of industries. It's like, yes, there's some things in these markets that are highly complex. Gas is another one. Housing, there are many factors that play into what exactly are the prices we're experiencing as consumers. But in a lot of these, we've found with more aggressive enforcement over the past couple of years that there's been illegal conduct from large corporations that have been contributing to high prices as well. And that's where we need the government to really step up, in addition to affirmative policy making, to enforce the law and cut down on some of this illegal behavior.
Wow. Morgan, where does the election cycle play into any of these changes, you think, in terms of unemployment and how people feel about themselves to go out and do what they need to do that actually changes the numbers that we are talking about? How have you seen that play into things?
Well, in terms of policy making, in theory, the election cycle has no impact. The Federal Reserve, and I'm only smiling because I think there are now a lot of people who question that. But in theory, the Federal Reserve is an independent body. President Biden, who currently it's part of his administration, has no role over what exactly the Fed does or what decisions they make. But people are human, and the Federal Reserve is made up of individuals that exist in this country and in this world, and they consume media like the rest of us and are, taking in all of the inputs and making their best calls and decisions. Economists are people too, right? And so I think it would be very naive to think that it doesn't have any impact, but, by the technical law or letter of the law, it is not supposed to have any impact. In terms of how people are feeling, the data isn't really getting into how people are emotionally experiencing the economy. It really is kind of nuts and bolts. Are you looking for a job? Have you looked for a job in the last month? Are you currently employed? Did you find a job? So that there's not as much area for gray, so to speak. But in terms of how people are actually living out those numbers and those experiences of what is making you feel like you're excited about the future and wanting to, potentially pursue an opportunity in a different industry, that kind of thing, some of the more subjective factors. I do think all of the talk about the economy, there's been a lot of criticism, and we've seen this in some of the polling, that even though the economy has been quite strong, that a lot of people continue to say that they don't feel that optimistic about where the country's headed economically or otherwise. And again, I do think that's where some of these experiences that you might just be having as a human being living in modern American culture, that could be impacting perhaps some of your psychology and your experience in the economy.
Before I jump to the panel, my last question to you is, what are the job sectors that we are seeing the growth, whether it's minuscule or whether it's by a couple of percentage points? What are these popular areas where people are entering into?
Great question. It varies every month. And this past month, it seems that the bulk of the job growth was driven by government jobs and healthcare and education. Which I think those have been the top for the past few months as we've been coming on and talking through this data. But it varies in terms of how something like manufacturing, if it's seen an increase. In this job report, we didn't see an increase in the manufacturing data. It really seems to have been driven more by the government job growth, which is another sign of something that, I wouldn't say concern, but then that kind of makes people think like, okay, well, if the most of the job growth is being driven by something that isn't technically, in the private sector, part of that, element of the economy, then maybe another sign that perhaps things aren't as strong as they could be and something to continue monitoring.
All right, I'm going to go to Dr. Malveaux. Question for Morgan.
Well, thanks, Morgan, for breaking down the First Friday report. Two-part question. You talked about housing, and housing, of course, is extremely important. And you talked about this algorithm, which I don't know anything about, so I'm going to have to look it up. But one of the things that I noticed in terms of rental housing is that corporations are buying up single-family homes and apartment buildings and then basically taking them off the market. And that's also a factor in sort of increasing the price of housing. And so I know that that's not, you're an attorney, but I don't think it's illegal. I think it's just immoral to basically take housing off the market. So I'd like you to think about that. But the other thing, we spend so much time every month, First Friday, looking at the data that comes from the employment situation. And how much faith should we really put in a movement from, let's say, 6.1 to 6.2? I mean, because basically, especially when we're looking at the Black population, we're looking at a very small population, and it's just as likely that that number will go either back up or back down. I think the annual average is a much more accurate way to look at what's going on in the market. But again, I'm interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, month to month, it's hard to make any definitive conclusions about what any of this data means. And so absolutely, we have to kind of see if there's a trend. When you start to see something that happens, the same type of growth in unemployment over several months in a row, well, then that might be a little bit more clear that there's something really to that. But even still, I think you're right. I mean, a lot of this is interpreting data and trying to take a lot of different inputs and reach conclusions. And it's not a perfect science by any means. So I do think we need to take it all with a grain of salt. And that's where, too, I think we need to feel confident in layering on our lived experience as people who are in the economy and our communities and what we're seeing on the ground, and make sure that those experiences are getting to the desks of policymakers. It might be hard to get to Jay Powell, who leads the Federal Reserve, but we all have people in Congress that are representing us that have a little bit more of a direct line and can send a letter and get their attention. So I think you've identified a really key point that in addition to the individual monthly data not necessarily being indicative of conclusive situation in the economy, that also we should feel confident in supplementing that data with what we're experiencing on the ground. It's as valid as any individual data point that we're reading about in CNN month to month. On the housing, I would just say, I think you're right that it's not illegal. We're seeing a lot of the private equity firms that are buying up, especially single family homes, turning them into rental properties, not putting them back on the market for sale. And that does impact the supply of housing overall that's available. And I do think, there's increasing intention now in Congress in terms of what that distortion of the supply of single family housing in different communities could be. And look, I mean, these large firms don't have the same incentive as a individual landlord who lives in the community, who maybe is managing 4 properties and trying to make sure, they turn a profit, but they don't have to be beholden to the financial incentives of Wall Street, which are looking for super profits. So it definitely has an impact on the housing experience that we all are experiencing. They have national portfolios and they have national investors that they need to turn a buck for. And I do think it's something that Congress should look into and limit just how much ability they have to control our housing supply.
Dr. Dubinga.
So, Morgan, I had a question, a kind of larger scale question. And people always talk about, well, when it comes to like gas prices, the president doesn't really control gas prices. That's happens, because of other factors. My question is, what does a president really influence as it relates to the job market? Because people talk so much about Trump's unemployment numbers versus Biden's, and some will say, well, it was actually COVID. No, it was this or that. To what effect does a president's actual policies affect the job market?
Well, I'm gonna get to that, but I do want to say that the president has control over gas prices, just so we're clear on that too. And in this administration, we saw unleashing some of the strategic reserves for sure helped to lower gas prices, though that's a global market. It's complicated. Having the Federal Trade Commission that was going after and exposing how an oil executive was colluding with OPEC to keep oil prices artificially high, leading to higher gas prices, about 2 to 4 additional thousands of dollars that every American family was paying during the pandemic because of this collusion. That's something this administration's gone after, and that for sure will have an impact on keeping, at minimum, gas prices stable and likely lowering them. So I agree. I mean, we have to push back on this narrative that, oh, things are just so complicated and what could anyone do? And if Trump, they're in office, but it's so hard. No, there are things that can be done and there are things that have been done, and we need to keep clear on the facts. Now, when it comes to the labor market, I mean, this is getting back to the manufacturing jobs that I mentioned. This was a month where we didn't see growth in the manufacturing sector. But as I'm sure a lot of us know, there's been big investments from the administration in the manufacturing sector, the Infrastructure Act and some of the climate investments and building out the CHIPS Act. But these are longer term projects. And so that is a lever that Congress has been able to utilize in passing this legislation, but the president's support of that legislation and making sure that the federal bureaucracy was also going to be on board to implement some of these grants, like Department of Commerce, which is in charge of the implementation of the CHIPS Act, which is going to increase our domestic production of semiconductor chips, which fuel pretty much every electronic at this point and a lot of different manufacturing items in the whole economy. That only happens, I would say, because of the leadership out of the White House that got to that bipartisan legislation in a really difficult political environment. So the issue, though, is that it's not right away. I live in Columbus, Ohio. It's in Central Ohio is one of the regions that's going to get one of these Intel plants in the northeastern part of our region. And they're only beginning to sort of break ground there. It's going to be several years before we really see that as a functioning manufacturing facility that then is going to have, even more jobs. So, it's what makes it hard, because I think politics is a game of immediate returns. You have a story that you can tell to help get elected. And sometimes the right thing is long-term investment. And we know we need that as a country. And having the type of leadership that's going to pull that off, it isn't always congruent with getting the quick hit on cable news, but it might be absolutely essential for us to have a functioning economy for our children and grandchildren.
Yeah. All right, Gavin.
All right, Morgan, thank you. Building off that point, if you were advising the Biden campaign right now, I don't believe you are, but
what a job. Don't put that on me.
No pressure.
I'm just kidding.
If you were advising the Biden campaign, how would you be encouraging them to message the economy right now in terms of, the accomplishments that they've delivered, which you rightfully pointed out aren't necessarily being felt as accomplishments by everyone right now. Also in terms of, the president's plans when it comes to the economy for a second term. And finally, perhaps some of the detrimental economic plans that Donald Trump has in store for a second term. So just curious how you would wrap all that up and encourage the Biden campaign to talk about the economy on the stump from here on out.
It's a great question. And it's one, we're grappling with at the American Economic Liberties Project, because though we are nonpartisan and engage with all sorts of stakeholders, our mission is to decrease the level of corporate concentration, economic concentration that has essentially ensured that the economic gains in our country stick with just the ones who already have it, the richest of the rich, the biggest of the businesses, to the detriment of us as workers, consumers, businesses of all sizes, businesses that actually want to follow the law. And in this administration, here's what I would just tell them to tell their story. They have actually started to turn the ship. How have they done it? By putting people in place who seek to change the 40 years of failed economic policymaking that we have had as a country. People like Lena Khan, who are at the head of the Federal Trade Commission, people like Jonathan Cantor, who's at the head of DOJ antitrust. They are taking on some of the largest and most powerful corporations in America and are saying, hey, even you have to follow the law. Google, Apple, Live Nation Ticketmaster, United Healthcare, right? It's rumored that they're going to be investigating them for how much they've been increasing healthcare costs. What 90% of Americans say is a concern for them about how high healthcare costs are. So we have villains throughout this economy that think they are better than us and they don't have to follow the law, and they are stealing our money and hurting our economic futures every single day. This administration has started to take them on. And there is a lot more work to do, because unwinding us out of this 40-year problem does not happen overnight. It is going to take a while, but the key is having leadership that seeks to do something about it. And what we've heard so far from Donald Trump is that, coming back to the gas prices example, we have one administration that's holding people accountable who have inflated gas prices, and we have an opponent who is saying that they are going to strike deals with big oil billionaires to make sure that law enforcement is not something that they have to ever think about. That's the contrast. So I think the contrast is important. I think it's important that you're actually doing something. And then, as you also mentioned, the vision for the future, keep going, right? We have huge fights on our hands. We have healthcare. I mean, getting back to United Healthcare, what are we going to do to make sure that not only is everyone covered with insurance, but we're improving the situation where you are not eating your income with all of these premiums, that we're not in a situation where we have things called pharmacy benefit managers that are making it so that you're hearing Walgreens, Walgreens is saying that they can't afford to be a pharmacy on the ground anymore. Now, there might be a lot going on there. I'm not stumping for Walgreens necessarily, but if Walgreens is saying the same thing as independent community pharmacists all over this country that are saying we have to close up shop because we can't make any money, we have a problem. And it's a problem that this administration has started to tackle. And we need to give them time. In my opinion, this is Morgan Harper as an individual, not as an employee of a nonprofit. We need to get them more time to keep going. Because the alternative is one that we already know. It's where we keep working and working and working, and we do not get ahead. It's where you can be a worker bee for the rest of your life, but you try to start a business, you're going to get crushed. This is not sustainable. We have to see change. We need it now. And we have had the types of leaders in this administration that appear willing to take that on.
All right. Morgan Harper, listen, we like you as an individual and with your nonprofit. You know, every time I hear you, I just want to get out a pen and paper and take notes. That is good information. And we thank you so much for breaking it down and being with us this evening.
Thanks for having me. And thanks for the great questions.
Yes, indeed. All right. You are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland@RolandSMartin.com.
I am Tommy Davidson. I play Oscar on Proud Family, Louder and Prouder.
Right now, I'm rolling with Roland Martin, unfiltered, uncut, unplugged, and undamn believable. You hear me?
right, so a couple of weeks ago, Roland was in LA for the Netflix premiere of Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. He sat down with stars Kevin Bacon and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Let's take a look.
So, gentlemen, glad to see you. First off, first memory of Beverly Hills Cop. What stands out?
I think I was in a movie theater in New York, probably bought my popcorn, went and sat with some strangers and, you know, watched it, loved it.
I watched it with my older brother. I was too young. I was probably too young to watch it even after it had come out, but we watched it, you know, on TV, probably on like a Saturday afternoon with some cereal or something like that. But you know, my brother was a huge Eddie Murphy fan.
Right.
And do you have any older brothers or sisters?
Brother, 1 year, 1 day older.
1 year and 1 day.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a little different. Mine's 6.5 years older.
Yeah.
So when I looked up to my brother so much, that anything he liked took on this air of, you know, ultra coolness. And for him and for me, that was Eddie Murphy. So to now get to be playing Eddie's sidekick in the new Beverly Hills Cop movie is just incredible.
It's also one of those films that were one of those franchises where people constantly quote things that happen. You could be at a party and folks will will start recounting this and this and this and this, and so that's always, I think, also interesting, which makes, I believe, a movie really memorable when folk will recite lines or scenes from a film.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the things, besides the fact that you just love Axel Foley and you love Eddie as Axel, is that the fish out of water story is a kind of a timeless story that works again and again and again. We were talking about Shakespeare before. You know, Shakespeare, you know, has a number of fish out of water comedies, and there's just something so great about the character of Axel, and we do it again in this movie, coming from a place that's so different, and then looking at Beverly Hills from that character's point of view is just funny and weird and great. You know, I love that piece of it, and I think it keeps playing.
And Beverly Hills deserves to be made fun of. Let's be honest. Like, Beverly Hills is a lot about flaunting excess wealth.
Yeah.
The world doesn't need that, really. It needs someone to come from Detroit and kind of take the piss out of this wealth worship.
So when you got an opportunity for this, had you worked with Eddie before?
No.
No. I always
Never
wanted
had.
to, of
And
course.
so for you, it's kind of like, all right, let's do this.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was kind of like, how is that possible that all these years paths have never crossed, you know? As you know, I've famously worked with a lot of people.
Yeah, you are the king of the six degrees of separation.
Right.
So he was a first.
Yes, it was the first time, and certainly a bucket list gig, you know. He is
now people who play 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon are going to use Eddie Murphy all the time. Because he's also worked with a hell of a lot of people.
He's worked with a lot of people,
He's going to
too.
be the first step in a lot of those games.
Yes, that's true.
On set, in terms of, here you're dealing with one of the funniest people in history.
He doesn't try to be funny, though, you know? It's not like...
But did you try to make him laugh?
Oh, nah, not really.
If you try to make him laugh, that's not the way to make Eddie laugh. In my experience. Like, he'll laugh if you just tell him a real story from your real life. He'll find the humor in it.
Got it. For you, in terms of playing, you know, not so nice of a guy.
That's the understatement.
Not the same as your character out of Boston, though.
Right. No, he's a different kind of bad guy. Yeah. Listen, I mean, I mean, that's a pretty good example. I mean, people who are have questionable moral values. Sometimes I like to go there. You know, I don't know why I find myself in that situation, but to me, it's really about making them different. And if you look at those two guys, they're really cut from a different cloth. So that's what's fun for me.
And of course, you're a different character, good guy here. But I was cracking up on the helicopter scene.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a terrible helicopter pilot.
Right. So how hard was it not to just crack up when he kept cussing you out because of your flying?
Such a great scene. Oh my God, I loved it. It was so fun to see again.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Yeah, let me just sorry to interrupt you.
Please go.
My wife was just screaming. She's like, oh, she's a very vocal. She watched a movie last night with the crowd.
So that was her.
That was her. She's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh. all through the helicopter. She's like, honey, all right, goodbye.
Well, that's because that helicopter really did that. It wasn't me really flying it, but they had a real guy, this incredible stunt helicopter pilot that really did do that stuff, falling off the building and coming really close to the street and coming really close to the bus. Like nowadays in a lot of action movies, it's all just CGI. It's all visual, digital effects. It's fake.
Right.
But this was a real helicopter doing these real things. They just photographed, and I think you can still feel that realness.
You really can.
Yeah, well, that was again. You saw the interaction. Again, I'm just sitting here going, I'm like, I know, because how he was just cussing you out through the whole deal, and you like, please shut up.
Yeah, it was funny. It's really funny.
Last point for both of you. I always ask this question of book authors. Your wow moment making this movie. Just that one thing where even you went,
oh, wow. I'll tell you, it relates to the helicopter. Of all the things that I've done and been thrown into, all kinds of, crazy situations, physical, whatever, on movies, the thing I've never done is they have these cars where I'm driving, but I have no control over the car because the driver's on the roof of the car with controls that actually operate the car, and swinging through a bunch of stunt drivers and these guys in the helicopter rig next to it. And they said to me right before we said action, somebody said, just hang on, because this is going to be a little disconcerting. And let me tell you, it was fun as shit. I mean, I was just like, this is so fun. I love what I do for a living. It was great. Shooting at these guys, and it was funny.
That was a crazy day.
Yeah, it was.
Shutting down Wilshire Boulevard, and we're in this hydraulic helicopter rig. It felt like someone had built like a Disneyland theme park ride just for us, just for the day.
Yeah.
All right. Well, certainly I hope folks enjoy it. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Cheers.
All right.
So, Gavin, I was ready for the movie. I've seen it. Did you get a chance to check it out?
I haven't checked it out yet, but I can tell you, I know what I'm about to do this weekend.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just one of those movies that, I was ready for a part. Axel left. He has been doing a lot out there. There's a really interesting interview with him for the New York Times on The Interview, where he talks about his career. He talks about, just making it through being famous and still really rising above and not getting caught up in a lot. And I think a lot of credit should be given to him, Gavin.
Absolutely. No, I think so as well.
Dr. Malveaux, have you gotten a chance to see the movie?
I have not. I am not the movie demographic, if you know what I mean. They do movies and it's sort of like a 25 to 45, and I've been there, done that, got the T-shirt. I probably will go see this with some friends, but I don't do a lot of movies.
So this is the woman who goes out at 2:00 a.m. with Dorothy Knight, but don't go to the movies. Dr. Debinga, have you seen it? And what are your thoughts about Eddie Murphy? Because he really is coming out and telling his story, telling some stories about, he felt he was treated with racist behavior on SNL. He's really talking.
Yeah, I have not seen it. It's definitely on my list. And I love the fact that he is still out there doing it as opposed to a Beverly Hills remake with some newer actor. I mean, I feel like there's such originality that's lacking in films and music today, and people are just rehashing stuff from the 80s and the 90s. So I'm like, if you still got the brother from that time period, put him back in. Let's see some growth and see what's happening. I mean, with Eddie Murphy, it's just iconic, right? I mean, there's no other word that you can use to really describe him. Someone who has had real longevity, somebody who, I teach out Pilates, and so, there's music in my class, and I be playing Party all the time, his one-hit wonders. I mean, he's a guy who's, y'all know that joint, don't be fronting, so, he's had success in multiple areas, and I feel like, hey, as long as you still got the talent, keep going. So I look forward to seeing it, because I love the Beverly Hills Cop series.
Yeah, I was in ShopRite the other day, grocery store, and they were playing a song, and it occurred to me, that's right, he sang that song. Well, let me go back and say that the movie, he revisits a lot of the same spaces and similar types of interactions that he does from the first Beverly Hills Cop movie. So as we leave this, I'm assuming we've all seen at least one of them. What is one of your favorite memories from Beverly Hills Cop, the original? I'll start with you, Gavin.
Skip me, because I think I'm a little too young to have seen it. I hate to admit, but again, this weekend will be a complete Beverly Hills Cop watch party for me.
We will get back to you. By the time it's all said and done, you're going to buy a Munford t-shirt. Look for that when you go back. Go look it up. Go look it up. Dr. Dibinga.
Yo, oh my goodness. I just showed this. My daughters are 18 and 15. I just showed this to them like 2 weeks ago. The scene where he's trying to check into the Beverly Hills Palm Hotel, and they're like, they don't have any room for him. And he's lying, saying he's a journalist. And he's like, I'm here. I was going to do a story on Michael Jackson. I was going to call it Michael Jackson sitting on top of the world.
That's right.
But I guess I'm going to call it Michael Jackson can sit on top of the world as long as he don't sit on a Beverly Hills Palm Hotel, because there's no allowed in there. And it's
That's right.
I love that. That's my favorite scene from all of the movies.
You have a good memory. You're going to see some of that in this movie where he's back at the front of a hotel checking in. Dr. Malveaux, can I count on you to say you've seen at least one of the movies?
Girl, that has been so long ago that I forgot. Let me just be totally honest. He doesn't remember, and I forgot. But
that's all right.
I am a big...
Well, listen, if you have some time...
And I saw the piece in the New York Times when he talked about racism and SNL. And what struck me is how these microaggressions stay with us so long. So this is a huge star who's sitting on top of the world, not top of the hotel, Obakongo, on top of the world. And, some slight remark that some idiotic white person made to him stuck with him. And it really just made me think about how we begin to unpack racism and unpack these microaggressions and frankly call people on them. I mean, he probably didn't feel that he had the career power at that time with SNL to say, yo, dude, that's just not cool. But as we age and grow, hopefully we take back some of that power and we call people on their BS, because some stuff is so very impactful. And, I talk about this on the show all the time, the work that I'm doing, the book that does not want to be written, Lynching, the Wealth Gap and Reparations. And when you read some of these lynching stories, you also get a sense of the pain with the Black people who know about the lynchings like Rosewood and are afraid to talk about them. Yeah. And so somehow we have to think about ways to open up our eyes, but also, and more importantly, open up our mouths about this stuff.
Absolutely. And no matter who you are, you can be a superstar like Eddie Murphy for decades. You still experience it, and it stings. He was hurt by what David Spade said on Saturday Night Live about his career, but he did get over it. He went back on and he hosted the show, said he was never going to do it, but he did. And I think that when people talk about Eddie Murphy and how he's making a comeback, they're wrong. He never went anywhere. It's on Netflix. All right. Thank you, Dr. Malveaux. Thank you, Dr. Dibinga. And thank you, Gavin, for being with us today. As always, your insight has been wonderful. Good to see you all. All right, and thanks for watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. He will be back tomorrow, I believe. And I'm Candace Kelly. And have a good night.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?